my like heart just sunk down to my toes. I'm like, oh man. I'm thinking everything I know, everything I love is behind me. Everything that is the unknown is in front of me, and I have no choice but to step forward. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was scared to death. I was going to say, hey, I've looked up your file. He said, man, he said, you think you're a big shot, running a big company, CEO. He said, you think you run things around here, right? I said, no, sir. He said, well, you don't. You don't run anything. You're an inmate. He said, I could send you up right now, level 1 shot, unauthorized communications. You lose your good time, and you're not going to get into any of the programs around here. And I just added a year to my sentence. That was my very worst day in prison, when I knew where I was. What was my worst day in prison? Well, I remember it vividly. I've been in prison at Leavenworth for about a little over a year. And I would get visits. And on the weekends, my wife would drive 4.5 hours one way. And we had issues with this one particular correctional officer, CO, who would do whatever she could do to make the points double count them. You had points in prison, and they would give you 24 points, and they count 1 hour as 2 points, or on Mondays it'd be 1 point. But anyway, she double count the points, and then somebody would show up, and they would be told to leave because the inmate doesn't have enough points. So it was coming up on my 25th wedding anniversary with my wife. How wonderful it was to be able to have a 25th wedding anniversary in Leavenworth prison. But we, were making our new weird normal work. So I knew this CO was going to be the visiting cop that day for the visiting room. So the night before, I wanted to make sure that I had enough points. My counselor wasn't there, Goodwin, and so I had no choice but to go up to what they call the bubble. That's where the cop would be able to see down both sides of the hallway, and it was all glass. And you go knock on the door, and you really didn't want to bother him because they didn't want to do anything for inmates. But I had to do it because I didn't want Julie to drive 4.5 hours and get turned away. So lo and behold, the guy that was in there, the CO that was on duty, was Mac, and Mac was intimidating. He was this tall, lanky guy with the billowing low voice, and people didn't know what he was going to do whenever he was on duty. I knock on the door and I said, hey, Mac, could you do me a favor? Could you check my visiting points for me? Because my wife is coming tomorrow. It's our 25th wedding anniversary. I don't want her to get turned away for me not having enough points. He takes a deep breath. He puts down his newspaper. He goes into the computer and he says, yeah, Cassity, you got enough points. You got 4 points. It's for 4 hours. Go ahead and get out of here. So I got on the phone. I called Julie. I told her that she's got enough points. We should be okay. And I double checked it with Mac, and he's going to be on duty tomorrow at the bubble. So I think we'll be all right. The day arrives, and it's always like you get this antsy thing in your stomach whenever you have a prison visit because you can't communicate with the people who are coming to see you. And you just have this thing like, I hope they, run out of gas, they don't get a car accident, all these weird things that you don't think about when you're not in prison. And then you get called on the intercom, and you wear like a different prison uniform, just a nicer one. Everybody wears the same clothes. It's all the same. It's a little bit nicer uniform. So I get my uniform on, and you can see there's an area from where the prison is, the front doors, and then there's a walkway that's got like picnic tables, and then you can see the visiting building, and you can see a little window through it to where people check in. So I see Julie. I get called to the front that I have a visit. I'm looking through that little window, and it's taking too long. And then I see Julie turn and go out the front door, and I'm like, man. So I go down the main hallway, go out the side door where these big, huge, tall fences with barbed wire are, but you can see the parking lot. I said, Julie, what's wrong? She said, they said we don't have points. We're out of points. I said, I know we're not out of points. I'm going to check with Mac. Hold on. About that time, the CO comes out into the parking lot, who's just turned my wife away. She points at me and points at Julie to leave. I go back up through the hallway. I said, Mac, there's been a mistake on the Visi points. About that time, the phone rings. It's the CO at the visiting room, and Mac gets up and bolts out. I'm like, well, he'll fix it. He knows that I've got enough points. He checked it last night. I know it's not normal to stand up for an inmate, but we all checked it out. He comes back in and he says, Cassity, you are in a heap of shit. My heart just sunk down to my toes. I'm like, oh man. He said, he said, I could give you a level 1 shot right now because you had unauthorized communications with the public to the parking lot. He said, I could send you right up the hill to the hole. So what do you think about that? I said, sir, I don't want that to happen. He said, you go sit out there on that bench. I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do with you. All this time I'm thinking about Julie, that she's just driven 4.5 hours for our 25th wedding anniversary. And now she's driving back, not knowing what's going on this side. She's just been told to get off the property. I sit there through lunch. I sit there for 4 hours. And what I'm starting to think is if I get a level 1 shot, I can lose my good time. That's 15% more time I'm going to have. I won't be able to get into this program that's going to give me a year off of my time with a level 1 shot. I just cost myself 15% more time, and I just added a year to my sentence. And I'm just awfulizing. It's all going over and over and over for 4 hours. And I realized that I have no rights. I'm an inmate. There's nothing I can do. The guy that's told me to sit on this bench checked my points. He knows I had enough points. And now he's telling me I had unauthorized communications with my wife to the parking lot. It's a door that I walk out of every day to go to work. He finally comes around the corner of the bubble and says, Cassity, come here. I go in there and he says, hey, I've looked up your file. He said, man, you think you're a big shot running a big company, CEO. He said, you think you run things around here, right? I said, no, sir. He said, well, you don't run anything. You're an inmate. He said, I can send you up right now. Level 1 shot, unauthorized communications. You lose your good time and you're not going to get into any of the programs around here. Or he said, maybe you've learned your lesson the last 4 hours sitting there thinking about how bad all this is. What do you think, Cass? Do you think you've learned your lesson? I said, yes, sir. He said, you sure you've learned your lesson? I said, absolutely. He said, all right, go on, get out of here. We're done here. Go call your wife. I was thinking, man, this is what, when people talk about prison, these unknowns that run through your head. I'd already been in prison for over a year, but this moment and this time brought me all the way back to understanding I was just 38224044. I had no rights. I thought I'd done all the right things. I checked my points. She turned her away. She went out in the parking lot, told my wife to get off the property, and came back in and told the CO that I needed to be charged with a shot. That was my very worst day in prison, when I knew where I was. A lot of people ask me about, bad days in prison. I'll tell you, one of the mind hacks I used in prison was to win the day in prison. You're probably saying, Brent, how do you win the day in prison? My daughter made a calendar for me every year I was in prison, and it had the family pictures on it. And every night before I went to bed, part of my routine is to write in that box on the calendar, my win for the day. And you're probably thinking, Cassidy, how can you have a win for the day? in prison. Well, maybe I had a great conversation with my wife or my daughters, or maybe I got forklift certified that day, whatever it was. Maybe I did something new on my exercise routine that was better than the day before, but I wrote it in that box. But one thing I wasn't in prison is I wasn't unrealistic. If I had a bad day, I had a no good, very bad day to my toes bad day. And I'd write it in that box. But one thing I would not allow myself to do is do two boxes of bad. I would not write another bad day next to a bad day. The reason why is that I was scared to death. If I had two bad days, it could turn into a bad week, a bad month, a bad year, and then I became institutionalized prison Brent. I did know what that was, but I didn't want to become that. And so my whole thing, my whole mindset is that I've got to find something to win today to keep myself being in control of my mind, that I was still moving forward like I always had before I was in prison. And it helped me, it settled me before I went to bed that I was somehow still in control of things. And it's important for people to remember that if you try to win the day, if you try to look too far ahead, it's overwhelming, but you can win a day. Like I couldn't look, I got 5 years in prison, but I could win a day. And if I had a bad day, like I said, I would let myself have a no good, very bad day, but I wouldn't let myself have two boxes of bad. It worked for me. It was a good mind hack, and it's a good mind hack on the outside. In fact, it's a great mind hack on the outside. One of the things that brings me back to that is my very first day in prison. I was thinking to myself the night before my wife and I had pulled up to look at Leavenworth Prison, and it was dusk. The guys were still walking around the fence line on the sidewalk, had their coats on, and then the lights were starting to go on in block A and B and C and D, and so you could see in there a little bit. Guys walking around, you could kind of see bunk beds. I was thinking to myself, wow, I'm right here right now, but tomorrow night, that's going to be me in there in one of those blocks or walking around that barbed wire fence. And it's not, I'm going to be there for a day or a week or a month. I'm going to be there for years. That is going to be my world right there. And I'm not going anywhere. It was just a lot so humbling to think that that was going to be my space. I remember pulling up. I didn't say anything to my wife about this. It was just me going to bed with this, thinking about it. And we got up the next day, and I was supposed to get in there at 1:00. We went, and I went through the drive-through at McDonald's. I got a Big Mac because I heard, you don't know when you're going to eat, and the food you're going to eat is not going to be as good as what you had coming out. So I got a Big Mac, wolfed it down. I got $200. They said I could bring in and put on my books. Went through the ATM. We pulled into the parking lot. This big Shawshank looking USP Leavenworth, the big stairs going up, gray looking building, 1879 built. It was a gray day, wind spitting, or not wind spitting, blow spitting in the air. January 14th, 2014. I hugged my brother, my mom, my wife, tell them I love them. I get out of the car. My brother says, bro, I'm going with you, walk in with you. We walk up those big stairs. I go in, open the door. There's two guards, COs. I said, I'm here to voluntarily surrender. I said, not here, you aren't. You go down there and stand by that dumpster, and there's a gate. You wait for it to open. It's all right. Walked back down the stairs, hug my brother, tell him I love him. He tells me he loves me. I go stand in front of that gate. And the wind is just whipping. I got a T-shirt on. I'd taken my coat off because I didn't want him to have my coat. And I hear the door open and close in the parking lot. It's Julie running towards me with the coat. I said, no, Julie, I don't want him to have that coat. I'm fine. I'll be all right. I love you. She goes back. I turn back around. Snow spitting, wind blowing on a Kansas plain. I'm thinking everything I know, everything I love is behind me. Everything that is the unknown is in front of me, and I have no choice but to step forward. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was scared to death. I was going to get in a fight. I was going to get stabbed. I was going to get raped, all those bad things. About that time, I'm thinking this, the gate opens, barbed wire fence, all the barbed wire above rolled. I walk through, CO's there, and we walk at the sidewalk and we walk into the bottom of this ugly looking building. I could just feel the freedom shedding off my skin. I go in, they take everything, they strip me down, they prisonize me. I go into this cell. There's 2 concrete benches and a stainless steel toilet. After about 4 or 5 hours, wondering if that was where I was going to be. I didn't know. You don't know. And that's the first thing you know is you don't know anything. And they're not going to tell you anything until the next thing happens. I get in a minivan about 4 hours later. They take me down to the prison camp. And one thing that is like TV is everybody looks at the person that's walking in. Check them out. What are they like? What do they look like? How do they act? You're given a inmate who's going to help you get your stuff. So inmate Watson takes me to down the hallway, and then we go down into this basement, and it's dark, it's damp, it's low ceiling, and there's this huge fence that says no trespassing, no inmates beyond this point, and that's where we went in. That's where you got your stuff, your uniforms, your boots, your coats, your stocking hat, your bedding. Got my stuff. They didn't have a pillow. They said, good luck with that. We went up down this hallway, fluorescent lights, these, everything was white except for these red pipes going down the hallway. We go to the last block. We go up the stairs, and I open up the second floor, this A2. He said, good luck with this. This is the ghetto. Maybe, Cassity, you'll be lucky enough to move in the suburbs where you can get a 2-man cell. And I look, there's 50 bunk beds. There's guys in there, 100 guys. There's a bathroom in the middle. It's got 6 sinks. It's got 3 showers. It's got 3 toilets. It's got 3 urinals. And I'm 2 place spots away from that bathroom. A guy walks up to me, stocky, looks like a boxer, Hispanic guy, tattoos. He says, you must be my new bunkmate. I said, I am. He said, well, you're going to need a lot of help because it doesn't look like you've been here before. He said, let's get your bedding. He said, we got to make this military style. He said, let's take a look. He said, they do the inspections on Friday. This is how your bed's got to be. He opens up the locker. He says, we got to clean this out. He starts cleaning it for me. I'm like, man, this guy is great. I find out later that he's the commissioner of the sports. He's a shot caller for the Hispanic group, and he's a great guy. He says, Cassity, come with me. Takes me over across the way. He says, Clark, this is Cassity. Cassity, Clark. Clark, you take care of Cassity. He's one of you. I find out not only is he one of me, he is from St. Louis. He went to my high school. He's 8 years older. We both played basketball. I couldn't believe it. Clark immediately helps me out, gets me more set up over there at my place. And he says, you can go make a call downstairs, Brent, to your family in the counselor's office. Takes me down there, come in. Goodwin, who ends up being my counselor. I said, I understand I can make a phone call. He said, that's right, Ray. You can make a phone call. I said, well, my name's Cassity. He said, you just look like Ray Romano. And in that moment, I'm totally out of whack. He thinks I look like Ray Romano, which is something my grandpa used to say. Funny, in a really weird time in my life. He said, give me the number, Cassity. I give him a number. All of a sudden, my wife and my daughters are on the other end of the line. I said, I'm here, Julie, and I'm going to be okay. I got a lot of people that are helping me, and I think I'm going to be all right. I know I'm going to be all right. I could feel in my throat. I was a little emotional just for the fact I'm talking to her. I'm in this space. And it was time to get off the phone, and I hung up, and I thought, wow, just like that, there she is at home, here I am in prison. And this is going to be this way for a few years. That night, it was the first standing count where they come around and the keys are jingling off their waist. They don't carry guns and they count you like cattle. Romo, my bunkmate, told me how this all went down. And lights out immediately at 10 o'clock. And I'm just laying on the top bunk of the bed. I haven't changed my clothes. I've got my coat that I've bunched up to use as a pillow. I'm just looking out this window at the USP that's all lit up on the hillside. And I'm thinking, wow, 6 years of this nightmare that I went through. And here I am, Leavenworth Prison, first night. What am I going to do? And I did something that I had always done that made me feel more grounded. Roma had given me a pen and a piece of paper. I got off the bunk, grabbed the pen and piece of paper, and there was some light coming through the window from the bathroom. And I started writing down what I could accomplish, what I needed to accomplish to get myself into this world. I wanted to get in the best shape of my life. I wanted to read as many books as I could read. I wanted to get a good prison job. I wanted to figure out how to work the phones and the computers so that I could become, efficient at communicating with the outside public. And I wanted to get into the program that could give me a year off. I wrote all this down. I put that pen down on top of my locker, and I felt different. I felt like, you know what? This is what I've always done. I've got to be me in here. Don't turn into prison, Brent. Do the things that I've always done. And I felt different knowing that I had tasks to do, goals set, start stepping forward. That's what I did. And when I got out, I realized I had survived. I realized that my family had survived on the outside. And there was a certain confidence that we had made it and we were going with a second chance in life.